IVM.
There's a quick survey to fill out on ivmpodcast.com/survey. It lets us know a little bit more about who's listening to us. And you know what? We're going to do a few prizes. So, we'll do a random drawing of maybe 10 people and we'll send you all some swag. Remember, that's ivmpodcast.com/survey where you can fill out the survey.
Hey everyone, welcome to Shunya One, episode 173. It's me again, still doing this show solo. And today we have yet another awesome episode for you. I'm talking to Mihir Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Teachmint, which is a very cool ed-infra company, not so much EdTech as you all probably know it. I think the conversation we had was really, really interesting because there's a fine distinction between these two. What Mihir talks about really is how deep the product and technology universe of education really is. Thanks, obviously, to all the stuff that they have been building. So let's take a break and come back and talk to Mihir about this very interesting space.
Ladies, I'm sure you will relate to it if I say that we are constantly busy with work, studies, cooking, and whatnot. And amidst all of this, we often forget an important element that needs our desperate attention: finance. So here we are, bringing to you SBI Life presents A Sip of Finance, a women-exclusive podcast where we will teach you how to manage personal finances in a simple and straightforward way with your host, Priyanka Acharya, a finance expert who's been in the industry for 14 plus years. And not just in English, but in 7 more languages. So tune in every Tuesday for fresh episodes on the IVM Podcast Network and all major podcast streaming platforms.
Hey Mihir, welcome to Shunya One. Thank you so much for doing this with us. How are you doing?
Hey Shiladitya, thanks a lot for inviting me on the show. Doing great. Great to be on the show.
Yeah, I know it's a Saturday today. We are recording this. And of course, you are in a very hot startup zone, of course, since you guys have founded Teachmint. Tell us a little bit about maybe yourself. I noticed that you've actually had a very interesting, I would say, background to before you founded Teachmint as well, right? Could you tell us a little bit about how that journey was?
Sure, absolutely. Let me walk you through my journey. And in the process, you will also get to know the co-founders as well, and Teachmint's journey as well in some sense. So broadly, I come from Bhopal, born and brought up there. Did my entire schooling there, and one of my co-founders, Payoj, he's a school friend of mine. So we are 4 co-founders at Teachmint, and Payoj leads product for us. So Payoj and I go back 20 years. I went to the same school, and post our schooling, I went to IIT Bombay. Payoj joined IIT Delhi, and the interesting thing is that Payoj is also someone who comes from the education industry background. So he has been in parallel for the last 12 years or so. Has been running his family's CBSE school in a remote place in MP.
Wow.
And that kind of got started him and eventually us to look at education as a space, and that was kind of in some sense the starting point of the idea behind Teachmint, that let's do something around education. So at IIT Bombay, I joined IIT Bombay in 2010. Did a 5-year mechanical engineering course there. Did my dual degree from there. And most of my time at IIT Bombay was spent in a lot of student technical activities. So we started a team around underwater robotics, where we used to make autonomous underwater vehicles. So these were, in some sense, self-driving submarines that you build. Wow. And we used to take them to a competition conducted at a US naval facility in California each year. So spend most of my time at campus doing this. This was a 30+ member team. And this is where I met Anshuman, who's my tech co-founder, leads engineering at Teachmint. And he's someone super passionate about building software for scale. So in fact, post campus, Anshuman started his journey with Times Internet. Interestingly, Anshuman is an aerospace engineer. So he's an aerospace engineer by education. started his journey, his career with Times Internet, and then moved on to Ruposo, where he was part of the core engineering team. Uh, uh, got a lot of exposure to engineering systems at scale, and and also built the recommendation engine that Ruposo runs on, or in some sense even that got passed on to Glance as well after the acquisition.
Right.
So for me, after campus, started my career in consulting. So was with McKinsey, mostly worked in Southeast Asia as a geography. So countries like Indonesia, South Korea, Thailand, Philippines. Spent most of my time there and a bit in India as well. Was focused on primarily supply chain management, transportation, logistics. And this is where I met Divyansh, who's the fourth co-founder, and he leads growth and operations for us. So interestingly, Divyansh is also from IIT Bombay, but we never got the chance to meet at campus. We met only while we were working at McKinsey, and
Wow.
and got to know each other there. So this is how largely the team of four came together, and this became a forum where we used to constantly get on calls, problem solve on what is the next impact creating idea that we can work on, and this went on for a few years. I think in parallel, after spending about 3.5 years at McKinsey, I took a break and then decided to join Oyo. So I was part of their expansion journey again in Southeast Asia. So led revenue and profitability for them in Malaysia. And I think in 2019, we took this call as a team that now let's huddle together and try to start up as soon as possible. So this was the time when I was in Malaysia. Divyansh, I think at that point was working for Swiggy, so he joined Swiggy after his time at McKinsey. Payoj was in the US doing research in machine learning. This is the time we took call in late 2019 that let's move to Bangalore. This is where things are happening. So let's move to Bangalore
Right.
and figure out what we want to do. So my brother stays in Bangalore. He has been staying here for a lot of time. So I just packed my bags, moved to Bangalore. Payal moved from the US. Divyansh was already here at Swiggy. Anshuman was kind of experimenting with his own startup. He was working in the space of recommendation engines as a service. So he was running a small startup called Rekwani, where the product was providing recommendations as a service to B2C companies. So in Bangalore, I think eventually what happened is that we got together, tried doing something in the extracurricular activities space for kids. It was pretty much a brick and mortar kind of an idea. We realized early that it was difficult to scale. So I think in after doing that for a few months, we took a break. Started doing jobs at different places. So I started working with Open Financial or Bank Open. They are a new bank in the SME space. Led their lending and wealth businesses till we finally started Teachmint in mid 2020. So yeah, that's how we all got together.
Yeah.
Broadly, the four of us look at clearly defined roles within the org. So I lead the team overall. Divyansh leads growth. So after IIT Bombay, McKinsey, he worked at Swiggy and then lately at Glow Road. Led their new business initiatives. Payoj, like I said, he's someone super passionate in education. So did his computer science from IIT Delhi. Post that, worked at Times Internet, worked at a few startups in product and data science roles. Lastly, worked at Oyo in their data team. And we spoke about Anshuman as well, someone really passionate about software. So yeah, we ended up starting in May 2020. And how we started is also a very interesting journey of how we came up with the product idea and ended up doing our MVP.
Wow. And, before obviously we get into that as well, because what you're just saying is all four of you from so many different paths ended up together and started Teachmint. That too, 2020 was middle of the pandemic, I imagine. So, while this internet boom was happening, the entire startup world was already, let's say, on fire in 2019. You actually did a lot of stints in a lot of places. And I think that you have a benefit of, let's say, this collective experience as well as staying in touch with each other that led you to where you are today. And congrats on that. I actually want to know why you chose what you chose and the MVP that you said. Were there any other ideas before this? Because in 2020, pretty much the space was do anything. From now, in hindsight, there were so many open avenues, you might say, to build something. So how did that come about?
Right. So when we started brainstorming around 4 or 5 years back, we were practically talking about everything, about every idea that comes to your mind, right? So starting from D2C brands to, let's say, e-commerce, to high tech, the entire spectrum that you can imagine, right? And problem solving from a pretty much first principle perspective of where does the opportunity lie, what are the sectors that are growing, etc., etc. And then we realized that in all these discussions, by the end of a discussion, we would invariably talk about education, because Payoj would pivot the discussion in that direction. And he was very clear that irrespective of what we end up doing right now, I'll start up in education at some point, and I really want to change how education happens at the grassroots level. So then we took that call. Why don't we just deep dive on education, right? Given the amount of passion within the team, and given the experience that Payoj had running his own school. And that's how we started brainstorming particularly on education. And in 2020, what really happened was that as the pandemic unfolded, the entire education ecosystem kind of came to a standstill. And there was this one call that I got from Payoj where he was mentioning how his entire school, all the teachers, right, irrespective of what they teach, which age band they come from, etc., everyone was really struggling to teach online. And when we spoke more about it, we realized that there hadn't been any focused productization done for a teaching use case, or specifically an online teaching use case. And this is where the idea of Teachmint really came about. The earliest, simplest idea that we had was, can we create a universal horizontal teaching application that any teacher can simply download on their mobile phones and start teaching online? That was the idea that Teachmint started with. And instantly, this was something that clicked throughout the team of 4 that we had. So Anshuman started building the MVP right away. He just started coding. Payoj started designing the product. And this was right when, like you said, this is when a lot of things were happening in the ecosystem. This is when the first pandemic lockdown was also present, right? So in the earliest days of Teachmint, what was used to happen is that Anshuman was full time. The rest 3 of us were doing our day jobs. And at the end of the day, 10 p.m. to 11 p.m., this was the time that I was assigned the duty to do dishes at my home. I would put the phone in front of me. The 4 of us used to come on a Google Meet call, and then we would discuss what is moving, what is not moving, where are we on, let's say, the designs, where are we on the first set of MVP that we have been planning. That's how it all started. And I think it was all really, really quick, and the execution was quite fast in the initial stages, because primarily of that passion with which we are building, that there is this immediate massive need that needs to be solved, and let's solve that. So the first MVP, interestingly, the first MVP was an APK of an Android app. So we were not even listed on Play Store or App Store at that point. And teachers could simply, so we gave that APK to a few teachers in our network in Payoj schools, 2 to 3 teachers to test it out. And we realized that in a matter of a week or so, that APK was going viral in teacher communities. So it was getting circulated on different WhatsApp groups. We had a few 100 teachers already using the application even before we got it listed at any place. And that is when we realized that this is a critical need that we are solving. And we went all in and just started building it with all our energy. So that's how Teachmint started.
Wow. And, just to dig a little deeper into what exactly the product is, of course, we'll, go into more detail. This is a space which you guys looked at, obviously, in context of, what you saw, what was happening around you, especially with, every teacher's going remote. But I think the domain of, let's say, what if you would call it a learning management system, right? LMS as a domain did exist, right? What was that? What did you build as a separate state of the art that sort of solved the immediate problem, which at least the market you guys are in, let's say the Indian teaching community, was not getting from other platforms?
Right. So broadly, if Shiladitya, we look at what Teachmint is into today, you can call us an education infrastructure startup. So Teachmint is largely what we are solving for is the intersection of digital infra and education. That is the space that we work in,
Right.
and what that means tactically is creating technology and software solutions for the education infrastructure for the entire education ecosystem as a whole. So broadly, if you look at the space of education software across emerging geographies, this is largely a white space, right? Deep mobile first relevant products for the emerging markets have never been built in the larger sense in a structured manner. So that is the playing field that we operate in, and within that, if you talk about the spectrum that we are covering, our SaaS products currently serve the entire spectrum from individual teachers to K-12 schools to higher education institutes, coaching centers, independent educators who are running their own online courses, to even EdTech players who consume some of the API offerings that we provide and expose to other EdTech players and corporates. So that's the entire spectrum that we cover. Now, what it specifically means in terms of product lines, so we have three major product lines at Teachmint. One is the Teachmint product itself, which is largely an institutional SaaS or a teaching digitization solution in some sense. So within that, you have a very heavy piece of learning management solution, as you pointed out, which is a mobile first solution taking care of assessments, homework, live classes as and when teachers need that, communications between teachers, parents, students, etc. So that's and sharing and creation of content as well, that goes hand in hand with everything that happens within the applications. That's the learning management piece of it. The other piece is an end-to-end school management solution. So if we talk about the schools and the institutes that are adopting Teachmint, in most cases, this is the first time that these institutions are using software in an organized sense. And what this does is that apart from the learning management piece between teachers and students, it takes care of your entire administrative workflows that happen in an institution, in a school, starting with management or performance management of your teachers, your staff, fee collection, parent engagement, that entire spectrum in terms of the kind of operations that are happening in an educational institute. So that's the Teachmint product, the flagship product that we have.
Nice.
Apart from that, we have two other product lines. One is called Teach More, because given the nature of the Teachmint application, we saw practically a horizontal use case on the application from, let's say, school teacher, tuition teachers, coaching operators. We had university lecturers taking their classes on the product, and as well as a lot of educators who are coming online for the first time and taking their different offerings online. So Teach More is a course creation platform. What it enables an educator is to create their own live, recorded, as well as cohort-based courses that they can bundle together and launch through their own domains, through their own Android as well as iOS applications. So it's a completely educator-focused course creation platform that we have. And thirdly, we also have TeachStack, which is an extension of a lot of in-house tech stack that we have built. So in the process of building Teachmint, we built a lot of proprietary tech. For example, the entire live teaching platform, the live classroom solution is something that we have developed completely in-house. So we do not use a third-party solution in that, right from, let's say, the media servers, structuring of our cloud infrastructure, the native device coding on Android, iOS, web, etc. It's all developed in-house. And the reason we had to do that is we were operating in a very different terrain from which, let's say, traditional education softwares or even live video softwares have operated, right? So majority of our users were primarily Android, basic mobile phones, limited or varying degree of internet connectivity. So that led us develop a lot of proprietary tech around that. Similarly, if I talk about assessments, homeworks, the way classroom as a product is built. So this is one piece that we had a lot of inbound demand from other edtechs, that can they utilize this? Can we provide this as an API offering? So right now, in TeachStack, more than half a dozen edtechs are operating on top of the tech stack that we provide to them. So there are edtechs in Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, running on the live class APIs that we provide to them through the TeachStack product that we have. So this is largely the spectrum that we cater to, and like I said, the idea is to just solve infra for education. That is what we are focused on.
Superb. I mean, that's amazing that you already have 3 product lines, and each of them are so well, I would say, well defined that they're parts of their own. Mihir, I want to go a little deeper into a few more things, but let's take a quick break, come back and talk some more.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says It's Cock and Bull, Cyrus, Kajol, Naren, and Antriksh discuss the meat ban in Delhi and UP and the controversial sociology textbook that outlines the merits of dowry. On IVM Like, Zalak, Antriksh, and Snehal discuss this year's Oscars and Grammys. On Press Decode, Sarah, Vagda, and Prafula take a look at Russia's alleged war crimes in Bucha. On The Fighting Goat, Arjun and Somesh observe how the MMA market has changed since 2003. And on Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav takes us from Udupi in Karnataka to Madurai in Tamil Nadu. We dive into the fascinating history of the dosa, its origins, and its evolution. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any of the platforms you're listening to us on, including the one you're listening to us on now. And also, please do check us out on YouTube. We have a number of channels. They're all available on ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to help us understand you, the listener, better, and how you like our shows, how you respond to the advertising, and so on. We'd really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week: SBI Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and Jupiter, a digital banking app. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Hey guys, welcome back. Mihir, you've been telling us about obviously the Teachmint product, or rather the depth of technology that you guys have built and the various product lines. And all of this obviously in under 2 years, I think, since you guys actually started and got formed. And in that same time frame, you've also done a few acquisitions as part of your growth journey. So what made you guys, let's say, look at this space so aggressively that, not just building product on your own, but also growing inorganically was something you took up as, one of your, let's say, strategic roadmap items. So how did that come about?
Right. So Shiladitya, I think, you are correct in saying that we are still less than 2 years old as a company. So we launched the first MVP in May. The company actually got formed or incorporated in late June of 2020. So still fairly a very young organization from that lens. But I think if the question is to understand why move so fast or where is that energy coming from, it's largely coming from seeing the kind of impact that we are delivering on a day-to-day basis, right? So we are realizing that we are doing justice to the mission that we started with. So the mission at Teachmint is to really expand the potential of education as a whole, and that is something that we are seeing happen incrementally day by day as we execute, right? So just the effectiveness of how formal education is happening and getting supplemented with the product that we are providing, how we are powering distance education in a larger sense to teach more in some sense, and that is that value is something that is quite evident to us on a day by day basis. I think when it comes to the execution speed itself, it's a factor of multiple things. So one was we are a fairly well-balanced co-founding team. So all 4 of us come together with very complementary skill sets, and along with that, the team that we have built is also really like-minded team that relates to the mission that we are building upon. So if you look at the earliest team that got created, it was largely from our own network. So you would see a lot of batchmates, juniors, seniors back from IIT Bombay, from the campus.
Of course,
you would see a very good representation of McKinsey as a DNA within the leadership team. You would see a lot of OYO. You'll see OYO as well there. So it's a reflection of the kind of networks that we were operating in throughout our careers, and largely similar, like-minded people who got together and started executing the mission. In terms of the acquisition themselves, they've largely it started quite organically for us. So the first acquisition that we did was of Teachmore as a startup and a product. So Teachmore used to be an independent startup being run by 5-6 highly passionate people based out of Baroda, and they had created a course selling platform that a lot of non-academic as well as academic educators had been utilizing, with very strong retention trends, very strong customer love. And the way we came about Teachmore was an interesting conversation that happened through Praveen Jadhav, or PJ.
Of course. Yeah.
And the way it happened was that Teachmore team had reached out to PJ that can you help us with some angel investment we are looking to raise. And then instantly
Right.
PJ saw that connection, that there is Teachmore and there is Teachmint, and there is just so much synergy in what we were creating. So Teachmint at that point was a classroom digitization tool, a mobile first, video first LMS with which was seeing and continues to see a lot of virality. And Teachmore was a course creation platform that a lot of our users could make use of. So he kind of made that introduction. We had that first conversation with the team. Deep and Harshal, the founders, very, very passionate about what they were doing. So the way we did it was we called them to Bangalore. We had a one-day workshop on what have you built. This is what we have built. This is what we are trying to create. And I think it was in a matter of those 7-8 hours spent together, we were able to handshake that let's do this together.
Wow.
Let's create a larger outcome. So that's how we happened to meet the Teachmore team, and that was made possible. Very similarly, then if you look at the acquisitions that we have done, let's say My Class Campus as a education ERP product, or AirLearn as a live classroom platform that we acquired.
Right.
They were all very specifically targeted to serve some immediate or medium term need that we had as a team, right? So if we look back and try to fit a framework to it on how we prioritized these partnerships, I think number one was just primarily whether there is a vision alignment between the founders and the teams, right? So if I talk about the My Class Campus team, they have built a very, very deep product in school ERP, and the founders just want to make sure that this reaches the masses, that they are able to deliver 100x, 1000x more impact than they are doing. The Airline team was a team that had created a very high degree of depth in live class technology, something that we were also developing and continue to develop in-house. And the founders, again, just wanted to make sure that the product reaches to masses and what they're building reaches scale. So that is primarily the first factor that we have looked at. The second factor is largely, is there a product synergy, or are we accelerating or deepening the kind of product that we are building? Because at the core, we are a tech and product company. And that is something that we saw across these different acquisitions. And lastly, then it comes about tactical things like the users, revenue, etc. But in our case, this has never been to, let's say, inorganically acquire users or acquire revenue in some sense. It has been about the people and the product synergies that we have been able to bring together. I think similarly, apart from the three of these, what happened was that there was also a wonderful team called Teachy that we came across. Yeah. So Teachy India was again a course selling platform that was run by a Singaporean parent company. Somehow they had to shut shops because of different reasons. We were able to absorb the entire team, getting to work them on a similar product of Teachmore that they are used to operating with, and the entire sales and ops team kind of absorbed within the Teachmore ecosystem.
Very nice. And, all of this, when you obviously relay back to how it all happened, and, while you're telling the story, I realize all of this you're doing is pretty much focused on tech and product as your core, let's say, thesis for choosing such partners and, acquisitions, which also goes to show that you guys are you've sort of managed to keep your focus on that layer of tech and SaaS and product building only, in spite of the, let's say, the EdTech space overall, which is, doing all sorts of things. So, what made you guys, by looking at the larger market, realize that this is where I want to be? And given that it's also SaaS and, selling software to, let's say, the Indian market, which I know is, well, I'm personally familiar with, but it's also something which is typically not uh, taken as the norm, right? I mean, it's new by Indians buying software, especially SaaS, and growing revenues for a SaaS company just within India and the Indian market is quite novel. So, how has that experience been, and how have you, let's say, deepened your conviction that I only want to play in this and don't want to, let's say, go at all into the upper layers of higher margin EdTech, so to speak?
Correct. So it's a very good question, Shiladitya, because I think the word edtech has become nuanced over the last few years. When typically people say edtech, they typically imagine a content first, student focused, consumer focused company. That is very, very different from who we are as a company. So in fact, in all our communications, we refer to us as an ed-infra company. You would not see us using the word edtech at all, given the generalization that happens around what you stand for. So yes, I think the way Teachmint is fundamentally different from a typical edtech is number one, we are not consumer focused, so we do not sell anything to students at all. Right. What we provide is a software technology solution that is provided to educational institutes, to teachers, to edtechs, like I mentioned, to educators, and that kind of simplifies the scope for us. Yeah. And we see a very deep enough impact that can be created by focusing on let's say the educator or the creator or the teacher as a customer rather than the student. Although the students are a massive part of our user base, ultimately there will be always multiple times of students present on the platform compared to the number of teachers. But we are pretty much, I would say, teacher focused or teacher first in the way we have looked at problems. Although there are certain problems that you need to look at from a student lens as well, of course, to give a great superior experience. And the other angle of along with it is that we are also not a content first company. So the IP here or let's say the moat here is not, let's say, content that is created for an Indian ecosystem for a certain board in a certain language. Although the platform enables you to create content, it supports different form of content that can be brought onto the platform. And the reason behind that was also that we wanted to create something that is scalable across segments, across geographies, and this is why if you look at Teachmint expanding from India to different countries in Southeast Asia, Middle East, etc., it has happened without us creating those dependencies on curriculum, content, etc. While enabling these to come onto the platform in different ways. That is how Teachmint is different from let's say typical edtechs that operate in the ecosystem. And I think it hasn't been the case with us that we have to actively problem solve this, because this is something that is part of the DNA itself of how we started, right? The word Teachmint or teach is an inherent part of Teachmint in some sense. So that simplifies things for us. That creates focus on where our focus is. And I think since day one we were clear that we need to be a tech and product company at heart, and that is how we have built it as well here.
Nice, and that's great to see that like you said, you've built the product depth so that there's always adoption in the larger edtech consumer market, as you said. Mihir, where do you go from here? I mean, if you've less than 2 years, you've grown so much. Obviously, there's massive product market fit along all your product lines. What does the next, I'm scared to ask 18 months, but maybe even 6 to 12 months look like for you, and where are you guys going?
I think, Shiladitya, with everything that has happened so far, we are still just scratching the surface. There are just in India, there are 1.5 million K-12 schools that we are looking at. There is massive potential in the higher education segment. There is an increasingly exploding educator-creator economy that's just coming about. And we are just touching the surface when you talk about the kind of impact that we are creating and the extent at which we are addressing the real need. So for us, it will be largely twofolds. One is going really, really deep into the problem statements that we are solving here at Teachment. So this will be about deepening the product lines, adding more and more value to our users, becoming their operating system in a true sense and the larger sense in how they operate. So that is where a lot of focus will be. A lot of focus is also on expanding the reach of the product. So broadly, Teachment today is present in 30 countries globally. We provide the platform in 20 plus Indian as well as international languages, and we have seen a very strong pull of the product across the geographies that we have operated in. Like I said, we have realized that education infra is a white space across emerging markets. If we leave aside North America or US plus Canada as a geography where there are still legacy products that have been built over the years, stabilized, and penetrated a deep market. Outside those geographies, this is a nascent space that we are looking at. So you would see a lot of expansion happening geographically as well in the kind of users that we are catering to, and lastly, just working on delivering more and more value and interesting innovating value in how we serve these needs. So you'll see a lot of focus and depth in the kind of proprietary tech that we develop. So that will remain a core focus to create IP that ultimately adds deep value to the users across these segments. And I think everything else will just follow.
And as an interesting question, when you guys started in the pandemic, now the pandemic is arguably, let's say, on its end. What do you see as the switch back to when students are back in schools, like physical schools? Do you expect, or have you already sort of anticipated that and evolved your product to still support teachers and educational institutes in schools itself, physical schools as well?
Absolutely. So I think that switch has happened for some time now, right? Schools have been operating on and off in an offline sense for quite some time now, and broadly, if you look at it, what has changed from that lens is that we are now looking at the customer from a much more holistic sense. So at the start of the pandemic, let's say 18 months or 2 years back, the product was primarily a teacher-focused solution that was enabling them to take live classes, give homeworks, etc. Now, what the product has evolved over the last 2 years is into an end-to-end school management solution that's catering to each and every software need that a school is catering to. And if you look at if you look at almost the entirety or majority of the sales that we have done, it has been in some sort of post pandemic phase that we have been seeing for the last few months. So you can say that this is in some way deepening the value add that we do as a product, as in a company, and bringing together stakeholders in a much more deeper sense. In fact, what we believe at the core of what we are solving is that the largest value will be delivered when we augment physical teaching and physical way of learning that happens in the classrooms. That is the biggest frontier to solve within tech, right? What really drives us is that when you go to a school and you see how teaching and learning is happening, it is practically happening the same way it used to happen 20 years ago. This is one domain where there has been very limited penetration of technology and digitization, which should have happened long back, right? If you look at a classroom in the US, it looks so different from a classroom in India. In most of the schools in India, teachers are still banned from taking smartphones inside the classroom.
Wow.
It's very far off to discuss the penetration of devices and technology into a physical classroom, right? So I think there is a lot of ground to cover in where we are headed, and I think broadly the way to look at it is a factor of three unique changes that have happened over the last couple of years, right? So people typically, when they talk about education as a sector over the last 2 years, they look at it from a pandemic lens on what was it before pandemic, what was it post pandemic. I think there are two other very important factors that have come almost at the same time. One is One is just penetration of smartphones in the country. The level it is today compared to, let's say, 3 years back, 4 years back, it's completely different, and that suddenly makes education software and education technology relevant for the masses. So you cannot blame, let's say, legacy players based out of developed geography for not developing products for an India focused geography, because it was not even relevant a few years back.
Correct.
And
Correct.
Similarly, I think the other aspect of it is also that internet connectivity has significantly shot up. So a deep, rich experience that you were not able to provide 3 years or 4 years ago, you can do that today. So these are the two other major factors that are really shifting how education technology is looked at, or how education software is looked at, and is seeing just massive adoption and pull across the segments that we cater to.
Amazing. Mihir, I mean, there's so much that to take away from the conversation here. But so for people who still have, let's say, questions and feedback and want to reach out to you or anyone in your team, I guess, what's the best place? Do you want to give a shout out to, I don't know, how to reach you, your Twitter handle or LinkedIn or wherever else, you'd recommend people reach out to?
I think email is the best way to reach out. I am at Mihir@teachmint.com. So I have now created this ritual of at least clearing my emails once in 24 hours. So diligently doing that. So
nice.
So yeah, that's the best way to reach out. Still not so active on Twitter as a platform.
All right.
But yeah, if someone drops an email, I'll try my best to make sure that we act on it.
Thank you for that, and thank you for this amazing chat. I'm obviously much more aware of now what you guys are actually building, and it's amazing to see that there's so much depth. And for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mihir. If you're listening to this on any podcast app, please make sure that you give us a rating and a review, and spread the word about anyone else who's interested in the space, especially I would say the building blocks of ed-infra and not EdTech as everyone knows it. I think there's so much to do here, and Mihir and the entire Teachmint team are doing some fantastic stuff. So thank you, Mihir, once again for this amazing conversation.
Thanks a lot, Shiladitya. It was an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you.
Are you looking for finance products and services that can enhance your personal finance experience? Are you looking for a space to talk about your financial product or service? And are you looking for a crisp talk show where the conversation is all about money? Well, your search ends here. Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta and I'm host of the Paisa podcast, and I invite you for the conversation about your personal finance on each Monday on the IVM podcast app or the website or on any podcast streaming platforms. See you folks.